something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Salutations, good morning, and welcome. New Haven, Connecticut, the nation, the world. Glad to be here. This is your host, the Readman, Jesse Turner, and you're listening to the Truth to Power Hour on the fabulous 103.5 WNHH New Haven. New Haven, maybe I should say New Haven because I do like New Haven. But welcome, and I have my purple on today, and I have my purple on in honor and reflection of what happened yesterday at Assumption Church over there, and the purple is a majestic color, and it's also Noble Marquez Green, who lost her child at Newtown, 6-year-old Anna Grace, beautiful, love purple, and I always been. This is the first year I'm not teaching my class, and I would always begin with something Anna Grace said, and she said when her mother was feeling a little tense, you know how it is, parents, and looking sad, and Anna Grace said to her mother, "Hey, Mom, don't let them suck the fun circuits out of you." And I can't find a silver lining in yesterday, but I can find one of the most beautiful messages from a child, and that is we can't let them suck the fun circuits out of us. So with that, let's begin by asking, I'll begin with Julian to introduce yourself, share a little bit about your passion. People notice we have 3 hats. All right. And all right, Julian, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I think we should call today the Hat Power Hour. Everybody's got their hat going on. I think Willis will tell that. I suspect will tell that story.
That's right.
We talked about it off camera. I'm Julian Vasquez Heilig. I am a professor of educational leadership, research, and technology at Western Michigan. I'm also the author of the blog Cloaking Inequity, which has been read by millions of people in more than 200 countries over more than a decade. So if you haven't been to Cloaking Inequity, I've been on fire. I am free of academic administrator positions, and so my academic freedom is in full force right now. So I would check that out. I'm also just recently started a new LinkedIn newsletter called Without Fear or Favor. And so join that on LinkedIn, Without Fear or Favor on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and put it in the chat box. I'm putting the Cloaking Inequity in there now for us and over there. And Willis is a dear friend. But anyway, Willis, introduce yourself.
I am Willis Earl Moore Sr., and I am one of seven children born to Freddie, Benjamin Moore, and Sarah May Moore. My parents raised 7 children on a corner in South Central Los Angeles, 41st Place in McKinley, and it's my sister and her family lives in that home now. So it's been 65 years that we've been in that place. And one of the things that I would introduce myself is my parents had a gardening and landscaping business, Moore Brothers Gardening and Landscaping business. And my father, in his business, he would do 2 things when he acquired a new client or customer. He would take a before picture of their property or home, and then once he had completed his work, he would take an after picture. And he said that those pictures he would use whenever he went to collect his payment. And if there was any hesitancy on the part of the customer to pay it, he would show them, this is what you had before, and this is what you now have as a result of my work. And so I would appreciate if you would honor the value that I see in my work and pay me with. So for Julian, I thought it would be appropriate for us to discuss how did we get here, and by going over some of the history of the educational inequity in this country. And if I may, I'd like to read something which I think kind of sets this. For me, I think it's a great summary of where we are. This is David Walker's appeal to the colored citizens of the world was a revolutionary 1829 pamphlet that denounced slavery as a moral and religious abomination, advocated for the violent self-liberation of enslaved people, and promoted Black pride and solidarity, arguing for Black people's right to the United States based on their foundational contribution to the nation's wealth and development. The pamphlet encouraged enslaved people to resist their oppressors by any means necessary and challenged the hypocrisy of American ideals of liberty, which spurred efforts, and this is the key part, which spurred efforts in the South to suppress Black literacy and mobility. So, Dr. Julian, I would ask you, if you would please, if you can kind of tell us how we, starting from 1829, if you like, how did we get to where we are today with the issue of educational equity in our communities?
Starting from 1829?
Well, but
That's a heavy lift, brother. So I look here,
particularly with the particular issue about them identifying that attacking our Black literacy as a way of suppressing our resistance.
Yeah. I think it's, you look back in history and, it's unfortunate. Now, PragerU might have a different perspective on this. And they might sell a different perspective as it will now be replacing PBS in the national conversation. And the point of me mentioning that is because education is the linchpin of democracy, and it is the infrastructure of equity. And so that's why you see what's happening now echoes what happened in yesteryear, is because those are the key concepts that I think we need to understand. And so it was purposeful that they didn't want the people who were enslaved here in the United States to be literate. You had conversations in the media recently where Trump said, "Oh, slavery wasn't that bad." It's worse than we can imagine. My last name, Heilig, is actually the slave owner's name. I carry their legacy in my name every single day. In fact, when people say my name wrong, they'll ask me and they'll say, "Did I say it correctly?" And every time I'll tell them, it doesn't honestly matter to me if you say it correctly because it is the name of the people who owned my ancestors, the Heiligs, right? And so this is the legacy of our country, whether PragerU wants to talk about that or billionaires or Donald Trump. This is the sort of sordid legacy of our country. And they understand the old adage that, the victors write history, right? And so what's happening right now is they want to erase the uncomfortable parts of our history because it helps us understand the context within which we're operating in 2025. And so, and there are bright spots in that history. We know that African Americans took charge of their educational experiences, that there were various systems of schools run by white folks across the South to educate African Americans, but they and Latinos and the Tejanos in Texas. I don't want to forget the Asian Americans that lived out in California. I don't want to forget all of the histories, the indigenous folks whose children were taken from them and sent to boarding schools so that they could be assimilated, and that their history and their science could be taken from them. And so this is a purposeful project. And I understand why, Florida wants to ban these conversations. I understand why Texas wants to ban these conversations, because they don't want Americans to understand the really challenging history and why we are where we are today. And it's a common tactic of authoritarian regimes to try to take over education, whether it was Pinochet or Orban in Hungary. I mean, the list is pretty long. I've been writing about this on my blog, and I suspect maybe my blog readers are tired of reading about authoritarian regimes and dictatorship. They might be, but I think it's so important to understand why these political projects are being undertaken, why they were undertaken in 1829, and why they're being undertaken in 2025. It's about control and power over other people. And but this country, the vision of this country as stated is freedom and justice for all. But unfortunately, there have been structures created in our nation so that it's freedom and justice for some. And so that's why you see the structures in education. That's why you see this sort of historical founding. That's why you see pushback against the 1619 project, because there are people that don't want history to be known. And I'll end with this. Putin once said that wars are won with teachers, right? And they understand whether it's every dictator on the planet has taken over education systems, as I just mentioned. And so it's so important. The reason why education specifically is facing so much heat, colleges and universities, because academics are the biggest threat to alternative facts. We are a threat to alternative facts, right? We have to also have to understand one more thought, and then I'll toss it back. And I think this is an important thought. I've been writing a lot about AI. And one of the things that I wrote about with AI is that digital information can be manipulated. So when Elon Musk got upset about something that Gronk produced, he went in and changed the algorithm, and the next week, his AI was declaring that it was a Nazi, right? And so the thing is that libraries are going to be so important. I know Jesse has been working on this.
Yes, yeah.
Libraries are going to be so important because you can't manipulate what's in the library unless you ban the books because it's in print. But as information and knowledge becomes digital, it gives the tech bros, it gives politicians the ability to literally change history with the click of a button. And so we have got to be very fastidious in these times. One, to understand what the political project is from 1829 or 1776 or whatever that date is to now. And that is to to create opportunity for just a few at the expense of the many.
You got it. And when Willis, when you mentioned 1829, the most popular and the largest selling teacher education book about teaching English, language arts, is by Dr. Goldie Mohammed. And I think I don't know if I put it in the chat box, but it was called Cultivating Genius. And she creates a framework for educating not only children of color, all children. But she uses that framework of that black intellectual of the 19th century, the 1800s, because it's not only 1829; it just goes on and on and on, all the way. And I remember, I believe she's at 500,000 copies of a Cultivating Genius, and it's a book that I often would have used in class. But it's and I know I don't know how many times we have to say this, but really DEI, let's just call it what it has been successful. Look at the fellows in the room right now. Look at Julian. Look at Willis. Hey, look at the once homeless kid over there. I was at their cutting trio programs. That's the Upward Bound. That's those programs for EOF programs for early college. I'm that student. I'm also proof that those programs were never just for people of color. They were means tested. So, but when we're thinking about that, and it's something, this conversation I just had with a teacher the other day, and we were talking about Jose Marti. She's Cuban, so Jose Marti. This is the liberator. This is Guantanamo. This is every Cuban knows Jose Marti. And she said, my children don't know Jose Marti. They don't know Malcolm X. They don't know anybody. So there is this. I think we need to acknowledge that what's happening now. I don't think it's new. But it's more powerful now because of who is in the White House, and it is an attempt to eliminate that history of everything black, everything brown, the history of immigration. I mean, I don't even know where to begin the attacks that are going on now. But Julian, is this an attempt to eliminate our past?
Well, it's not that you talked about how there's nothing new here, but I think the key piece is how far they're going. Of course, troops have been deployed. Roosevelt, there were veterans that were camping outside the White House 100 years, almost more than, I guess, almost 100 years ago now, and they deployed troops against them. There were presidents who have attempted to influence the Fed, right? There are presidents who have provided pardons. Clinton pardoned Mark Rich, right? And so there's, you can think of I wrote a whole blog about the whataboutisms, which is that you have these conversations with supporters of the right wing, and where they always go is whataboutisms. Well, what about this? What about that? But the problem is that what we've seen historically with each of the sort of challenging things that we're seeing out of the current political administration, what they do is they do things on steroids, right? And unprecedented type things, and not comparable to historical precedent, right? So, you saw troops deployed to Los Angeles. Now you see threats to deploy troops to Chicago. You see them preparing to do this with, an executive order that says you need to train the troops to be deployed into cities, right? So yes, it's true that troops have been deployed. There are historical examples of that, but never for the reasons or at the scale that's being proposed now, right? So I think that it's important to say that yes, much of what we see today in politics, there are things that you can point to in history amongst Democrats and Republicans. But what you see today is a steady march, not towards history, but a steady march towards other much more sordid history like Pinochet and Chile. That is where we're marching.
Unbelievable, and I agree with you. Willis, we're talking about concepts that I've spent my career working with parents, children, and teachers. I mean, that's been the bulk of my academic career. I'm not always at the policymaker tables. I'm not always with the leaderships in there, but I've always been with parents and teachers. And what we're talking about is very complex. Willis, your wife asked a question, so we were talking about the local NAACP, and we should be cognizant that we have a Flame Award winner as a guest here, But your wife asked the question that makes the most sense to parents. Could you tell us about that question? Because we need to explore it.
Sure. It came about out of a sense of, I think, recognizing, my wife recognizes this, that here in the,
Willis, give her credit. She said, make sure he names me. I don't want to get in trouble.
Well, I tell you, as of September 22nd this year, she will be my bride for 35 years. She is Mrs. Tracy Nixon Moore. And her concern that we share is that in our community, for those that are aware of the issue of educational equity, the question is, what tools can we provide that will help them? We attended the first day of school with our local NWC president, Jan Edwards, had us greet students. And one of the things that we both observed there was that there was a lot of things going on other than teaching, right? For example, at the beginning of the school, we saw there was the school is located in sort of right in the middle of a neighborhood. And so there's issues about traffic and safety, buses dropping kids off and kids going into the class and stuff like that. And so to manage that, the principal had his art teacher out there, and then there was also the music teacher and a number of other teachers there. And that's how they started, basically directing traffic, getting kids in safely into the classroom and stuff like that. So you realize that they're starting their work day, not teaching. They're starting it, doing, what's an issue that many schools in the town don't have, because the other schools, and I understand other schools in the town have been upgraded, so they created a more of a safety place for the parents to come in and easy go in and out. But in this particular school, it's one of the last ones to receive any type of upgrades or building remodeling. And so I realized that we often are in situations where we have to do more than other people doing the same jobs, right? Does that make sense? I mean, like, there used to be the great slogan in the Army, we do more before 6 o'clock a.m. than everybody else does. But the teachers in our communities have to do more just to be able to get in position where before that bell rings and they're in class, they have to do so much more preparation and stuff like that. And they oftentimes don't have the resources. The schools don't have the manpower to be able to do that. So my wife and I would appreciate just having us, how do we have any tools in terms of what they can use to be able to kind of do that? Is that?
I got something for you.
Okay.
So first, let me set a little bit of context. One of probably the biggest honor of my life, you mentioned it, Jesse, probably was the NAACP Keeper of the Flame Award this summer at the convention. That's probably been the biggest honor of my life, probably beyond the PhD, even. So let me say that. I've had the opportunity to work in the NAACP as a civil rights leader over about the last decade or so. I'm still pretty young here, but so one of the things that was discussed at convention was a new partnership with the Schott Foundation and others, a Thrive strategy. And right now, where they are is they are gathering unit leaders who want to be involved with this new Thrive campaign. So stay tuned. That work is underway. It's coming. One of the things when I worked with the task force in the spring, folks bring me in to, I'm a person who has a lot of creative energy. I don't know if you knew that, Jesse, but I have a lot of creative energy, and so they brought me in to bring some ideas to the table, and one of the things that I talked about with that group was what I call we need a black print, like a blueprint, but a black print for this work. Because it's important to understand that the right wing had been working on Project 2025 together for some time. It's like the greatest hits album that you get from Prince or Michael Jackson, but it's like their greatest hits of bad ideas. That's what Project 2025 is. It's like decades of bad ideas. And they've accomplished more than half of it already. So I think the first thing is that we need to have our own Project 2027. I'm starting to get emails about folks who are starting to do that planning. I think the NAACP, I think local units, you need to have your own Project 2027 for your community.
Yes.
You need to get together and you need to articulate it. Another thing that I'm really proud of is on a plane coming back from Rome at a conference. I went to an education conference and there was no teachers, parents, or students at this particular conference. It was in Rome, Italy. And there were education leaders and people from commissions and, all these high-level folks. And I thought to myself, the people that are at the table are not the people that are actually impacted by the decisions that are being made in communities, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's when I came up with what I called community-based accountability and strategic planning work at the local level that would then be funded by resources coming from the state. And that actually became, for those of you in California, that seminal work became the LCAPs in California. I gave that idea to Linda Darling Hammond, and they made it. So community planning, planning a Project 2027 for your community. So that's one idea. The second idea is something based on equity audits. Now, in educational leadership, and you can do research on this, again, it's equity audits. One of the things that we encourage educational leaders to do when they go into their roles is to audit different aspects of equity in the organization that you're joining. Okay, so that you understand the breadth and the scope of what's happening for students of color and other historically marginalized staff, faculty, students, etc. An equity audit. Now, I was thinking, how could we take 25 years of NAACP resolutions on education and use those to audit in local communities? So I actually created an equity audit using the NAACP's education resolutions. For those of you that don't know about education resolutions, I'll give you a quick, fast background. So basically, NAACP units propose resolutions. They go to the state convention where they're voted on by the NAACP state convention. Then they go to a national resolutions committee. They're voted on there. Then they go to the convention and they go to the floor of the convention and they're voted on there. And then they go to the national board and they're voted on there. So as you can imagine, you start with 100 resolutions and you end up with 5 at the end of the day. I'm just estimating. And so each year there are resolutions that are voted on that go through this extensive process. Well, the NAACP has 25 years online of our education resolutions. And so what we did is we went and we took those resolutions and made a 100-question equity audit that every community can use based on the policies and beliefs of the NAACP civil rights, or the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. So communities can also do that, because sometimes communities don't know all the right questions to ask. They know a lot of the right questions, but there's some others. And so the NAACP really has given us guideposts, and you can do your own equity audit of your community using the concepts and ideas and the advocacy of the NAACP as weight behind that audit. So 2 ideas: a Project 2027 for your community. Second, an NAACP inspired equity audit in your community.
I'm trying to put those ideas in the chat box as we're going, because we have some golden nuggets here. So,
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Willis.
Question. Dr. Julian, how important is, as community comes to put this document together, this Project 2020, how important that the members of that project have sort of a shared history of the community? Because, for example, I know in my family, I said I'm one of 7, right?
Yeah.
But even among my siblings, we remember different things differently, right? Even though we were right there in the same house, eating the same food, raising up. And so the community, the same thing, as I've met people here and they tell me one. In fact, I was at a meeting last week, an NAACP sponsored event, and there was a gentleman talking about the business community. And he made this comment about part of the problem was the Black leadership was disorganized, and that's why there's so few, or the working relationship between the Chamber of Commerce and the Black community is what it is. And I was like, that's not what I heard, from people that were here. So how important it is that there be this sort of shared, not everything, but the core history.
Well, you should ask Target about whether the Black community is organized or not. So I can understand why a chamber might make that argument, but the Black community is very organized. In fact, I think the Latino community, the Asian American community, the indigenous community, during the civil rights era, they collaborated, they shared tactics. There's a long history. So actually, I'm gonna be honest with you, that's just offensive to me that someone would make an argument like that the Black community is not organized. I think the problem is that you've got to understand who the leaders are in the Black community. And the only way you know that is if you're in community with African Americans in your community, right? Whether you've shown up, whether you've been to the NAACP annual dinner. And so if you're not present, then you might be bamboozled by who are actually the leaders in a particular community, whether it's African American or otherwise. But for those who are present in communities, they know who the leaders are and they know who the community looks to. And so that to me, that's just offensive, and shows a lack of engagement on their part. But I'm not saying that that's an unusual sentiment from that's heard. But no, I would completely disagree with that. So, but let me get to the core of your question and get past my offense, which is that you have to have a wide group. You have to have a wide set of perspectives when you create these coalitions. And I talked about this in a blog a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of days ago, or maybe even last week, about how you create your coalitions and get your peeps, if I can use the language of my generation. Because you have to develop those relationships. In fact, right now we are working on a statewide belonging conference. Because let's just be honest, the indigenous community, they know each other. The black community know it. The Latino community, the Jewish, within these sort of siloed community, is there some crossover? Absolutely, but I couldn't tell you the 100 leaders from all the communities of color in my state. And so we're actually organizing a conference. And here's another nugget. We're actually organizing a belongingness conference where and we are doing calls with every single person that's gonna get invited to this conference. So it's not just an invite out of the blue. We are working to develop relationships and networks because down the road, when things happen or when we want to organize or strategize, we have to know each other. And so we're so siloed, that we have to do that work. So that's just another nugget. So absolutely. And look, a lot of people don't know this, but I moved to Detroit on Sunday, and so from West Michigan, and I was in a shop yesterday, and the young woman asked me, "Where you're not from here?" She said to me, and I was like, "Well, I'm from I grew up in Lansing," and she's like, "Well, you need to learn Detroit." And so that is absolutely true. I have so much work to do to understand the history of this place as compared to the place where I grew up, Lansing. And so, yes, absolutely. You have to have people in the room who know the place, who are the leaders. You got to have a diverse set of groups, and that's how you develop those coalitions because things are going to happen. And if you have that coalition, if you have those relationships, you will be able to respond forcefully.
So
Thank
it
you.
makes perfect sense. Uh, we're not going to get out of this situation if we're not all part of that solution. And Willis, I would add that local, because when Julian mentions the work that's being done in California, it's all about local control. But I will be the first to tell you that for the past 30 years, uh, all our policymakers, almost all our legislators, almost have been complacent in taking away local control, taking away elected boards of education, elected boards. This is how I could fight back against something I don't agree in school. So we have, and just down the road, the city of Hartford, the mayor appoints a majority of the board. And so we've been dismantling local control for the past 3 decades since No Child Left Behind. It's something
Yeah.
that's important. So how do we rebuild? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
That we rebuild these coalitions. We
Yeah.
fight back for, because it's political.
Yeah.
It's complicated, but it's also simple.
I'll make a quick thought on that. So I remember when I first introduced the idea of community-based accountability at NYU, a lot of the professors said, "Oh, but with local control, this happens or that happens or this happens." Yeah, but it's why you are focused on local control. Are you focused on local control as a democratizing force? So it's not, you don't just stop at local control, or is it local control as a as hegemony, right? So is it about control? And so what you see in Texas is this whole conversation about local control when it's convenient for hegemony. When they need the legislature to have state control for hegemony, then they'll do that. So It's local control as a democratizing force. How do we bring people to the table of all different backgrounds instead of how can we gerrymander all the people of color into a tiny blue dot in Dallas, a tiny blue dot in Austin, and a tiny blue dot in Houston, and then reach fingers of legislative districts 400 miles across across the state, so that we can. And look, I want to say this, because there are some people that say, "Well, the Democrats are weak." Well, my friend Gavin Newsom is showing the Republicans that there are consequences for their actions. For all of us, I think we're probably bullied when we were in school, almost everyone. And so I punch bullies in the mouth. And that's what Gavin Newsom is doing because bullies only understand power, right? And so the Republicans understand if they go ahead and gerrymander in Missouri or wherever, that New York is going to gerrymander, and then it'll be a waste of their time. And so what you have to let a bully know is that bullying you is a waste of their time. And so finally, Democrats, and I'm going to say one other maybe potentially controversial thing. There was a whole conversation, 3 or 4 years ago about abolish ICE. And people chuckled to themselves, oh, this would never, this is not going to happen. Why, because a lot of people didn't even know what ICE did. But let me tell you this. Let me tell you this and take this to the bank. If the Democrats regain control of the Senate, the House, and the presidency, ICE is done. Like, they will literally no longer exist. I think you should take that one to the bank.
Take it to the bank, like Malcolm said, the ballot or the bullet. And we can win the ballot. We can win it, but we only win when we have coalitions.
Got to push back.
That's the stuff over there. 4% of Democratic voters stayed home in the last election. Trump did not.
It's not just that, Jesse. 90 million people didn't even vote.
90 million. Well, then, yeah, it's insane. But let me come down for another question. Yeah. That Willis, I'm going to steal your thunder on this, but Willis always asks me. We've been having these conversations for a number of years. When all the cycle of news stories come out with how low black boys' reading scores are, or black children, and we always have to comment. What are we going to do? And I often I'll say, well, it's complex. The assessments that we're talking about are meant to fail a majority of people, but really, when we come back to it, what can we do locally? And what I've always, because I do work with lots of parents, and I always remind them, are you really going to depend on schools? My mother was a very strong practicing Catholic, praying all day long. I grew up in that household. But one thing my mother, when people used to talk about bring prayer back into school, my mother would say, I don't trust school. I'll handle that. So part of the things, maybe Willis and maybe Julian can help me. How can we help parents, teach children about who they are, where they came from? What can parents do? Because we want solutions. And my feeling is just one parent can change the world for a child. All right. Willis, why don't you start us off? Because that's like your question. And then we'll ask you.
I came across this quote by historian Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And he said this. He said, historical people will not remain oppressed because they know who they are. And I think, Jesse, that's what we need to encourage parents to do with their children. I believe that everyone should aspire and work to prepare themselves to become a subject matter expert of their own history. And by their own history, it could be their family history and so on. Because if they don't, then they leave it to others to write that history and to tell them who they were and what they did and stuff like that. So I think just telling kids, the basics, like who their grandparents were, what were the names of their 4 grandparents, and so they identified those 4 families, and then go about the business of documenting who those people are. For example, most kids now have cell phones, right? Smartphones or whatever. And just sit down sometimes with a parent and a family and just say, hey, tell me about your parents, or tell me, how did granddad make a living? Where did you live? And stuff like that. And in that, they get a sense of who they were before. And I believe with that, their future becomes possible because, oh, well, I can do that, or I can be like that. God, my grandfather, started a business. Well, maybe I can start a business. Those types of things. So I think that's sort of like something I think, again, that's accessible to everyone to do. Just take the time and have your parents and people in your family tell you the stories about your family. There is a woman by the name of Tamar Lanier who just released her book titled From These Roots. And her story is an incredible story of her fighting Harvard University for possession of 2 photographs of her great grandfather. And it's just to see her be victorious in that fight. I mean, that's, the David going against the Goliath. I mean, someone taking on Harvard University and actually being victorious and prevailing and getting some measure of justice in that process. And it's all about the fact that she was determined to, because the story that Harvard told about her ancestor was not who he was. And it was not the story that Tamar heard growing up in her family. So that was the key thing that she told me was the most important thing. She said they lied about him. And, the gentleman is, his name is, I'm not even going to mention his name. I'll just tell you that he's recognized as the father of apartheid, as it was practiced here in the United States. And Harvard was part of the Harvard curriculum for years. And so that gives me hope that it's possible for everyone to do that. Everyone can be as courageous as Tamar Lanier in championing the ownership, the right to tell of her family's history. And again, that's again, I'd encourage everyone to do that, to do your best at doing that.
Yeah. So I think as parents, the reason why there are these attacks, as I mentioned before, in education, is because we are raising the most woke generation in American history right now. Yeah, I said it. The most woke generation. And what does woke mean? It means that young people see inequities in our society clearly. They understand the historical roots of those inequities, and they're refusing to stay silent. And it's not just race and gender, it's also the environment. And so, yes, we understand this is the most woke generation, and they're able to identify the problems. And that is scary to people who want those problems to stay cloaked, to stay hidden. So you think about the Parkland students and what happened after their classmates were murdered. In the face of that tragedy, they organized, they spoke out. David Hogg is a national voice, and they continue to demand change. And that is scary to people, that there are young people that are showing us what it looks like when youth channel courage into leadership and impact. And I want to tell you, parents, right now your kids are watching you. And they're not just paying attention to what you say in the car or at the dinner table or when they ask you questions, but they're paying attention to what you do. And they're learning from how you're responding to the current unprecedented time in history, how you're responding to conflict with other people, how we show compassion to people who are not exactly like us, and how we stand up for people for justice, how we stand up for people when something is going on around you, when someone is being discriminated against. Your kids are watching you. Every choice you make is a lesson. So I think as a parent, we have to model what we want our students to be when they're the nation's leaders. So I think you should show them persistence. I think you should show them courage. I think you should show them that service and community and your neighbors come first, because the way we lead right now in this moment shapes how our nation is led tomorrow.
So we've got this it's definitely Parents are the key. And something I want to add, it's not only parents, it's grandparents, it's uncles, it's aunts, it's cousins. Every family has someone who is that kind of cultural champion or historian,
Yeah.
and in their families. So
Mhm.
I get this, but I also have a reality that parents are struggling right now, struggling to just stay awake when I'm working 2, 3 Dunkin' Donuts jobs because no Dunkin' Donuts would employ me for 40 hours because they have to give me health care. But I'm struggling to stay awake, and so one of the things, and I want to do this to honor Tracy Nixon more because she asked, what can we do locally? Well, I think what the NAACP can do, what unions can do, what educators could do, what libraries can do, what all of us can do is find ways to help those parents be able to bring them, for instance, when I used to do parent universities, I share great books, and my books are always great, diverse books. I believe America is a beautiful tapestry, so often denied by power in this country. But the parents would say, well, how much are those books, Dr. Turner? And these would be New Britain parents, Willis. And I'd say, well, good picture books, probably like anywhere from $15 to $25. And so their heads would bow, and I say, hey, but do you have a Barnes and Noble near you? Do you have a library near you? Did you have, they used to have Borders. And so I would tell them, you know what I did? I couldn't afford those books either. So I brought my daughter with me to Barnes and Nobles, took her to the children's section, grabbed 10 books, brought her back to the table, ordered my coffee, and probably a little, piece of coffee cake or something. And we did that. I got access to the books, and and I know they're closing our libraries. They're getting rid of our librarians. It's because what Julian said. Julian, you said we have raised the most woke generation
Mhm.
in history. And you're not afraid of the word woke, and neither am I, and neither is Willis. Woke means what he said. It means that a generation that's aware of injustices, and they're demanding we change. So I do want so part of this, I'm asking, maybe we'll, since today we talked a lot about the NAACP and maybe the NAACP, like the Children's Defense Gun Fund with freedom schools. But maybe the NAACP can also help us, help parents discover resources that are not costly. Resources, I know about the libraries because my grandfather used to have to pick me up from school, and I sit in the library with him, and he'd be there with all the old men reading international papers and stuff. That's what they would do. But maybe, do you have some ideas? And I know, Julian, we're gonna do the 100 questions. We're gonna do all the important work. We're gonna get the vote out. I mean, I'm with Reverend Barber said last week, man. This is it. This is it. But are there things that this local grain and local control, like the California program, are there things that the other things the NAACP might help us do to help? And I'm not saying educate parents because I don't like that word, but inform parents about the resources in the community. Do you have some ideas? I know I'm putting you on the spot, Julian, uh,
Oh,
but
well, so I think I want to go back quickly to you never put me on the spot, Jesse. So I do want to go back to the equity audit because one of the things that the equity audit allows us to do, excuse me, using the NAACP resolutions is not only understand where the disparities are in the district, because oftentimes we talk about disparities between districts, between my town and your town, but there's also
It is.
disparities within the district, right?
Yes.
Everybody knows
Yes.
where the nice houses are in your district that they're going to get a great elementary school. Like it's a
Yes.
guarantee.
Yes.
Everybody knows that the district wants to keep those parents happy.
Yes.
But the school where you have 90% students of color, or you know what the situation is going to like, it's the elephant in the room, right? But the thing is that you have to have the data to make that case, and it's not because we want to be critical of educators, critical of policy. We sometimes policymakers, they don't know the exacts of all the things, and so by creating this data, not only does it inform the parents of the different circumstances, like a lot of parents won't know, for example, where the AP classes are, or what the dual enrollment offerings are, or that, your high school may not have filled out the paperwork to do dual enrollment, whereas the high school across town did do that, right? And the principal might be so busy that that wasn't the top priority. But if you have parents coming and saying, we really should have dual enrollment classes with the local university, well, because the state is paying for it and it's free, right? That should be happening. Whereas, AP has a cost. It's not inexpensive, right? So that's the kind of stuff that the equity audit would really get at for communities. It's not to put anybody on the spot, although the results could lend it the NAACP to wanting to do that, but it's going to inform parents. It's going to inform the local chapter. Every chapter has an education chair. Every state conference has an education chair, and national typically has an education director. Although right now I don't think national has an education director. So education is ingrained in what the NAACP does, and we have got to use our people power to get good information to members, local chapters, to Chamber of Commerce. I know I was a little tough on them earlier in this call.
Not at all.
District folks. We have got to get good information out there, and that's one of the reasons why the Trump administration is trying to control who is producing the economic data, because data is power. I always tell my kids, information is power, and so to me, that is the place where if I'm a local chapter, I want to expend some energy, because we can deliver to you the 100 questions that will empower you to ask really hard questions, and questions that are rooted in civil rights themes. So I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I really, really believe that this is a very powerful way that parent, and the thing is, you can unleash parents with these 100 questions and say, here's the survey. Go to your principal, go to your district, go to your school board member and say, I want these questions answered,
Yes.
right? And they're very specific. Now, districts and universities and other organizations, they don't love to give out information. And so that's where the advocacy and the organizing comes in. Some leaders are very transparent. And let me say one other thing here. You didn't ask this question, but I think, well, you did. But what else can you do? Communities have to understand. Now, I'm going to use higher education as an example really quickly. With last year with the Gaza protests, a lot of presidents and provosts fell flat on their face, and you can list them. Columbia, a lot of those folks don't have their jobs anymore. And the reason why that happened was because when universities, and let me throw in school districts, and let me throw in schools, when they were hiring people for those jobs, being able to engage with community around controversial topics and be able to negotiate with students and deal with the broader politics was not on the list of things that they were looking for. It's kind of like if you are dating somebody and the only thing that you care about is if they're 6'5", but are they a nice person or not is not on the list. Well, you're not going to get nice person. You're only going to get 6'5", right? And so what's the challenge that we have as communities, and I'm talking K-12 communities, I'm talking higher ed communities, is we use the wrong criteria to hire our leaders, and the trustees use the wrong criteria. And so you have got to be involved with those processes. You can't let them happen behind closed doors, because that's why we are continually disappointed by our leaders. That's why you're continually disappointed by the people that you meet on Tinder or whatever, is because you have the wrong criteria for the leaders that you're choosing. And that's why they continue to fall on their face in terms of progress, in terms of innovation, in terms of equity, because we are prioritizing the wrong thing. We want the right pedigree, or we want them to have gone to the right institute. We have got to do a better job as communities of choosing our leaders.
So I want to remind us we're coming down to our ending times, and I do want to say thank you to Dr. Vasquez, thank you to Mr. Moore, thank you to 103.5 FM New Haven for this time on the air. So we really have at this point, because you've been wonderful guests, our audience is listening. So let's give them the 30-second shout off. And Willis, it's your turn. Give us a shout out.
Well, I just want to thank Jesse and Dr. Julian for this discussion. And Dr. Julian, I got my assignment. I've got my assignment.
Appreciate
Thank you.
So the other day, I went to a Chinese restaurant. It's my favorite restaurant in Kalamazoo. It's called Hunan Garden. And the fortune said, if you could believe it or not, you will make change. I chuckled. I laughed at first, but then it kind of hit me hard. Because making change isn't about luck or chance. It's about rolling up your sleeves and deciding to show up every single day. Because change doesn't come from having a title or a specific degree. It comes from the choices that you make every single day. Staying to help when no one else does. Speaking up when silence is easier. Sharing your time with a student or a young person who needs it. All of these moments, they add up and shape who you are as a human and the communities that we live in. So each of us has something that we're good at, something. People email me all the time telling me that they're discouraged and they have no idea what to do. But everyone has talent. So maybe it's teaching, organizing, building, social media, humor. The challenge is to find your gift and lean into it and use it in this moment, because each one of us can make change if we just make those small choices each day. And I'm telling you this not because my fortune cookie told me, but because each of us has that power.
Old Sam Cooke said a change is going to come.
Power's on the hour.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a
Power Hour.
man gone over there telling me I got to.
Hey, Dr. Julian, we come
Time we stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.